Now, number of points here. Notice that the immigrants, all of them, look at the names that I mentioned. Uthman ibn Affan, Uthman ibn Mad'un, Mus'ab ibn Umair, not Zubair, but Abu Salama, Abdurrahman ibn Auf. In fact, Zubair ibn Awam, yes, he did migrate. What's common about all of them? They're all Qurayshis. They're all Qurayshis. They're all high status people, right? Why couldn't the low status immigrate? They were slaves. They were slaves.
Together from Allah Maheshwari's book.
They what?
Allah Maheshwari's book. Details of the life of the Prophet.
Yusuf Ali?
He's quoting from the Quran.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. Why were all of these from the noblemen of the Quraysh? Because the slaves didn't have the political luxury to emigrate, right? And this really shows us an interesting point. SubhanAllah, if you think about it, the people who needed to immigrate the most couldn't do so. Bilal could not immigrate. Ammar could not immigrate. Ibn Mas'ud could not immigrate. Khabbab could not immigrate. Right? And the ones who were the most elite, Uthman ibn Affan, I mean, he was the one they sent in Hudaybiyah because they know the Quraysh loved him so much they wouldn't dare hurt him. Right? Remember Hudaybiyah 10 years later? This is Uthman. They know that he is the most noble amongst them. Even Umar says, Ya Rasulullah, yani you know me, Uthman has a better position with them. Right? So the elite of the Quraysh who are Muslim immigrate. And this shows us that, subhanAllah, I mean, the fact of the matter is that a person does have to take care of himself. And if these people, even though they're not as persecuted as the rest, but they have an opportunity to have less persecution, they should avail themselves to the opportunity, right? There's no point in them remaining and being persecuted just because there are other people who are being persecuted worse than them. You guys following this point here? There's an element of Ya ayyuhan ladhina amanu alaykum anfusakum, take care of yourselves. And there's nothing un-Islamic about that. That our Prophet ﷺ is telling those who have the political capability, go ahead and immigrate, right? Even though there were people who needed to immigrate worse than them. But what are you going to do? So you make the best of a bad situation. And this is, in Arabic, there's a qa'idah, a maxim. I'm always scared using the word qa'idah because, you know, qa'idah of course means a legal maxim, a rule, right? And that's why those guys called it al-qa'idah because it's the base, right? But we use the word qa'idah all the time. The funny joke is that when you teach the kids the Quran, what is the book that they use? Huh? It's like, so there's a joke that if somebody sent an email that I need to teach my kid the qaida, right? And so it was intercepted by the FBI and it caused a huge issue. It's like, you're going to teach your kids qaida? It's like, no, the Nurani qaida is the, you know, alif bata. We're teaching them the alphabet. So the point being that there's a maxim in fiqh that says that you basically have to choose akhaffu dararain, or the lesser of the two evils. You always have to go with the lesser of the two evils. You can't save everybody. You can't. Does that mean that all of them suffer? No. Well, those who can go, can go. Let them go. And let them have a better life over there. This also shows, and this is a very important point, this also shows that not all of the lands of the non-Muslims are the same. Some of the lands of the non-Muslims are peaceful. You can live there and worship Allah. And others are hostile. Mecca and Abyssinia were not the same lands. Abyssinia was a land they could emigrate to and live in peacefully. Mecca was not. And this is a very important point that we especially need to extrapolate from in our times. That not all of the lands are the same. There are lands where freedoms are guaranteed. And there are lands where people are persecuted. And so in our religion, we have the clear-cut political notion that there are certain lands you are allowed to live in and you should live in. What is the condition? You have the freedom to worship Allah there. And if we have that freedom, then we remain law-abiding citizens of that land. And this is, I have talked about this in many lectures. The model of the Abyssinian Muslims is a model that we here in America can benefit from. I'm not saying it's exactly the same. There's nothing, no two things are exactly the same. But I'm saying overall there is a model. And that model is what? You live as a minority in a majority non-Muslim land, and you obey the laws of the land, and you understand that you are citizens, you are under the government of that land, and you don't intend to overthrow the constitution of the government. The Muslims of Abyssinia were not plotting and planning to overthrow the Najashi, were they? Right? And they were not even allowed to do this. They were entering on a visa, basically the equivalent of a visa, and that visa allowed them to live and worship and participate in the community without any problems. And therefore this is a model that we here in America can basically emulate. A lot of the extremists are on the vibe of basically you cannot live in America. It is haram to live in America. That is their opinion. In response, we say the Muslims were living in Abyssinia, and their goal in Abyssinia was nothing other than the freedom to worship Allah, correct? Right? They had no political ambitions, none. And they remained there for more than a decade. And this is interesting. The Muslims in Abyssinia, way after Medina was founded. In fact, not just more than a decade, they remained there for 14 years. For 14 years. 7 years after the Hijrah, the Muslims were still in Abyssinia. It was only after the Battle of Khaybar that the Prophet ﷺ sent them a letter to Ja'far. Ja'far did not participate in Badr and Uhud. Why? Because he wasn't there. Ja'far was in Abyssinia, taking care of the Muslims over there. Only after the Battle of Khaybar, and that's in the 7th year of the Hijrah, did the Prophet ﷺ send them a letter and tell them to come back. And this shows that there was a community of believers even when there was a Darul Islam in Medina. There was a community of believers living in Abyssinia even when there is a fully functioning Darul Islam. How about when there is no Darul Islam in our time and there is no Khilafah in our times? How can it possibly be wrong to live in a land where we have the freedom to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in?